All right, this is lecture 3.1. This whole unit is going to look at many of the aspects that impact culture and the cultural landscape. So we'll start with religion and then go on to language, ethnicity, and folk and pop culture. The emphasis is not a deep dive on any of those things. The focus is on where the tension points are in a lot of different countries on those points. So be it religion, be it language, ethnicity, and how resolutions can happen for those conflict points. A deep dive on things like religion and all their theological beliefs. That's a different kind of college course. That is not the point of this one. This first lecture, though, will go into some of the key terms around religion, and then the remaining lectures on religion will be about tension points, and then language, again, will be some key terms around language diffusion, and then mostly around language tension points, same thing for ethnicity and folk and pop culture. So we're going to jump into religion first. Hopefully a lot of it is a review, dig deep in your ninth grade memories, ninth grade world history, maybe a little bit of middle school. But again, the focus for the unit will be on where these elements are dividing and where they are unifying countries and peoples. So two key terms around that we'll keep coming back to this year are centrifugal forces, thinking just like in physics. So it's something in this case that divides a country or a people, just kind of like the diagram shows. So it's things like religion, language, war, income inequality, geography, racism. These are all things dividing a people or a country that can divide them. Centripetal, just like in physics, it's bringing it, pulling it in, it's uniting a country, and religion can also do that. Language can, so those things can both divide and unite depending on how they're viewed. National pride, transportation, central governments can often, in the right-sized country, can unify a country. They can also divide it. National disasters, they can divide a country based on the response, or they can rally the country to work together. So they can also be a centripetal force. Okay, some key terms around religion before we jump into the five big ones. So there are polytheistic religions. Again, you should have learned that in ninth grade, so hopefully that you remember that. Polytheism is where they worship more than one god. Think like Egypt, Rome, Greece, the Celtic. So again, anyone that's worshiping more than one God. Monotheism is worshiping one God. So that's like Islam, Christianity, Judaism. They worship one God. That's monotheistic. Two other key terms around religion. Religions can either be universalizing, meaning that they are adaptive to different cultures, and they have an element of having missionaries or people are supposed to evangelize and seek converts, like bring people into their religion. Okay? Because of that, because they're adaptive and because there are people in the religion actively trying to spread it, they are usually widespread over at least a continent or in some cases the globe. So Islam, very widespread over the Middle East, Central Asia into Africa, and then pockets elsewhere, also into the Pacific Islands. Buddhism all over Asia, and then pockets elsewhere. Christianity all over the world. So those are universalizing religions. Conversely, there are ethnic religions. Their key features are they typically have stayed near their hearth. They do not have any kind of evangelical component or missionary component, so there aren't people tasked with trying to spread it and get more people to join. Any spread that has happened is usually by relocation. On a map, they're going to be clustered near their hearth. If there is any spread elsewhere from their hearth, that is usually clusters of diaspora. Diaspora are members of the group that have moved, emigrated by choice or force, have moved elsewhere. So examples would be like, for the big ones, Judaism and Hinduism are considered ethnic because they are clustered near their hearths, and maybe there are small pockets of people that practice it elsewhere. A lot of the indigenous religions in North America, South America, Africa, some that are in Asia, those are often classified as ethnic religions because they are kind of practiced by a smaller group of people right near the hearth where that particular religion started. Okay? All right, so we're going to look at the big 5 religions of the world for this. And again, there's no expectation that you have a deep theological understanding of each of these. That's a different course, but it's so you have a basic appreciation of where these things started, how far they've spread, and what their architecture would look like as it impacts the cultural landscape. Okay, so the oldest of the big 5 is Hinduism. Started in South Asia, in India. It is an ethnic religion, because you can see on the map, purple, that it stayed mostly near its hearth, with pockets of diaspora immigrants throughout the millennia. It diffused mostly through relocation diffusion, so people moving into Central Asia, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, excuse me, and then elsewhere in the world as the world became more global. The spatial pattern on a map is clustered in South Asia, and it's got pockets of diaspora, especially in Europe and North America, especially recently. Okay. The house of worship for Hinduism, so that you could recognize it from a picture or in your travels, it'll be a multi-tiered building that looks like this. It's going to be very colorful. So color is very important in Hinduism. They have a whole holiday that's about colors. If you've ever seen the pictures of the big color kind of parades or parties where they're throwing like colorful kind of dust, chalky material. So it looks a lot, because Hinduism and Buddhism have a connection. It looks very similar in its multi-tiered effect, but the corners are different and the coloring is different. Okay. The other thing that makes a Hindu temple look very distinct, or it is very distinct, is that it's the only of the 5, it's the only one that doesn't have congregational worship, meaning there are large groups of people worshiping together. Most Hindus practicing Hindus have a shrine at home where they worship, and then occasionally they'll go to a temple like this, a holy site. But there's no large group with like a priest or minister type person giving a sermon and running a service. They do not have that kind of worship. All right. Buddhism started later, where there was a Hindu prince who just felt like Hinduism was not doing enough. He had witnessed some particular suffering, and he went and he started to meditate, and then reached enlightenment and became the Buddha, and that kicked off Buddhism. So he had these Hindu roots, did not abandon all of the Hindu teachings, but felt like Hinduism was not doing enough about inequality and finding peace and harmony. And so from him being believed to have reached enlightenment and becoming the Buddha, Buddhism developed. So same hearth, South Asia, the Prince Siddhartha, who is the Buddha, is in the same area, so South Asia, India. It is universalizing, though, because they do have, if you've ever seen Buddhist monks, they have monks and missionaries that are spreading the teaching of Buddhism. And so it has spread over much of Asia, and then there's pockets of diaspora elsewhere. So that diffusion is a couple things. So one is it's contagious and relocation. So those missionaries are traveling. People are obviously trading. There's all kinds of the trade routes over the millennia with like the Silk Road. So it's spreading that way and person to person. It did also have a hierarchical element, because there were a variety of emperors or political leaders with power that also promoted Buddhism for their empires. Sorry for the announcement. One of the most famous being Emperor Ashoka. So some emperors forced or promoted Buddhism on their countries. Spatial pattern is widespread throughout Asia, especially in Southeast Asia, also in Sri Lanka. It has pockets in India and Pakistan, and elsewhere, and a big component in Japan as well, Mongolia. But there are many different kinds of Buddhism, so it has had a stimulus diffusion element as well, because it has changed over time and throughout in different areas. Okay. A Buddhist house of worship looks like the classic Buddhist house of worship. Again, they can worship in any kind of building, but the classical architecture you'll see when traveling in Asia, it'll look something like this. So multi-level, just like Hinduism, But the corners will be upturned. That's believed to scare away or protect from evil spirits. So multi-leveled, except these upturned corners. It'll be a lot less multicolored. Red will be a bigger theme, or it just won't be all the bright colors of a Hindu temple. They also have, unlike Hindu temples, they do have large worship and prayer together. If you've ever seen in like movies, Buddhist monks praying together. That can also happen for common Buddhist worship as well. Okay? All right, the 3 Abrahamic religions, again, hopefully a reminder from 9th grade world history. Dig deep into that memory. So, around 2000 BCE, surrounded by polytheistic societies, if you remember. In the Middle East, Abraham is the original prophet, was believed by the Abrahamic religions to have received the word that there was one God, not many God. And so he and his family and his followers, they start preaching monotheism and starts Judaism. It's an ethnic religion because while they were teaching it, there weren't like an evangelical missionary component over the millennia. So while Abraham was getting converts and people over the millennia were getting converts, there aren't like Jewish missionaries out spreading the word in more recent times. Okay, the diffusion has mostly been through relocation, especially because the Jewish faith at that time and over the millennia was not well received in the Middle East always. Sometimes accepted, some not. If you think back to 9th grade, sometimes kicked out, especially by the Romans, on and off throughout history. So sometimes forced relocation, sometimes voluntary relocation, and then in more recent time, there's been both forced and voluntary relocation, spreading groups of diaspora. So it is clustered in Israel, around where it began, but then there are pockets of diaspora, especially in Europe and North America. There's also pockets in like South America and Africa and Asia, but the biggest clusters are in Europe and North America because of European immigration. Okay. The house of worship for Jewish people is called a temple or a synagogue, and they can really have any kind of architecture. There's no like one single style that if you looked at a building like a Buddhist temple, you can be like, that is a Buddhist temple. They don't necessarily, you can see here two varying drastically different styles. A kind of key feature is that Hebrew is usually present on the signage that would indicate you're looking at a temple or a synagogue, but otherwise there's no classic architecture to be able to like walk through an area and be like, that's a synagogue. So there's no particular style that you'd be looking for. It can look like, again, many of these religions are adaptive, and so some have adapted different architectural styles. So about 2,000 years after Abraham, still believing in Abraham, Jesus being born Jewish, Christianity kicks off with the debate over Jesus' relationship with God. And again, hopefully that goes back to 9th grade world history. You remember much of that. AP is not going to get into AP Geo is not going to get into a bunch of that history, but know that there is a split and division over Jesus' relationship with God. Is he just an important prophet, or is he the Son of God and the Messiah? So that is where the debate is. But the hearth is same place, Middle East. Christianity, though, does have an evangelical people that are practicing it, are supposed to go out and evangelize and spread the word of Jesus. And there are active missionaries for Christianity. So it is universalizing. You can see blue, it is all over the world, and then in pockets in some of those other areas. Especially historically, there was a lot of hierarchical spread, meaning missionaries were forcing it on people, especially indigenous peoples of North and South America and Africa. There's a contagious element too, person to person and relocation. And stimulus, because it has also changed and there's many forms of Christianity now. So it is all the diffusions, but an important element to remember is that hierarchical, that there was a power element, especially historically. You can see on the map, blue, it is very widespread throughout Europe, North and South America, South Africa, Australia, especially any place that was colonized was going to have Christianity spread there hierarchically, a little bit contagiously, obviously the people, the colonizers, relocation, diffusion, so all those things, okay? Just like Judaism, the classic architecture for a church would be that spire with the cross. But in modern times, you see a lot of churches are using up the old big box stores, like some of the tech companies that have gone out of business, like computer sales, or like Walmarts that have gone out of business. So churches taking up those big box store spaces in strip malls. So churches can really have any kind of architecture. They have an adaptive element to their culture, so they adapt to the local architecture. Finally, so it's about 600 years after Jesus, Muhammad, again, think back to 9th grade, dig real deep. Muhammad has his revelation. He also visits Abraham, Jesus, Moses, kind of in these religious experiences, one while he's sleeping, one while he's in a cave. Angel Gabriel comes to him, and he starts Islam. So he has the same roots, same God as Judaism and Christianity, same, they revere Moses and Abraham. Jesus is important in Islam. They just don't agree, like Jewish people, that he's the son of God, but still an important person. The hearth is the Middle East. In this case, Saudi Arabia is where Muhammad was from, so a couple hundred miles south of Israel. It is universalizing because there is a missionary component, and again, it has spread through all kinds of diffusion. So we have hierarchical. There were lots of powerful leaders, Muhammad himself, sometimes forcing it upon areas through war, sometimes by choice. So there were people in power and emperors promoting it. There's a contagious element too, where it has caught on, where monks or missionaries have come to an area and spread it, especially in like North Africa, and then relocation, okay? Spatial pattern, widespread, you can see red all over North Africa, East Africa, Middle East into Central Asia and southern kind of Russia. And again, widespread throughout Middle East, North Africa. Okay. House of worship, just like Judaism, Christianity, there's kind of the classic style that you can see here, where there's the mosque. It'll have the four spires, the minarets, and usually the big central dome where the congregational worship and prayer would happen. Inside, it's oriented towards Mecca, and there usually is like a courtyard, and there's also an element of hygiene that Buddhists and Hindus will also share, where there's an element of like removing shoes, washing face and hands, so there's a cleansing process. The Catholic Church has a small element of that with just the single kind of drop of water when they enter church, but adapting to the places that they are. This is a mosque. This is a mosque here, one of the mosques here in Maine, so they can also be in just a regular building. So it does not have to look like the traditional mosque architecture. So that is it for Islam, and we'll return to religion in the next lecture.